When creating or designing software, we have a wide variety of different data types that our programmers and software designers can use to actually create the code. Integers, floats, strings, booleans, arrays, and lists, they're all data types. Whether using an integer, float, string, boolean, array, or list, these different data types build up our actual software. Let's go into why data types matter. So choosing the correct data type for information in a program, application, or a script is important because it helps ensure that our calculations, comparisons, and overall data storage in programs work correctly. Data types also help our scripts and programs run more efficiently, and if they're properly used, they can help prevent certain errors and programs from crashing. They also make automation, monitoring, and various troubleshooting steps a little bit more reliable and more simple because we're using the best data types to build our actual programs. So for example, in a networking piece of software, we might use an integer for a port, number being 80, instead of a string. And this would just help us ensure that our script or a program can perform calculations or comparisons correctly, more fluidly, and accurately. The first data type that we're going to cover here is an integer. An integer is a data type that's used to store whole numbers, both positive or negative, with 0 decimals involved. So some examples of integers here would be -1, -2, -3, 0, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 0, whatever it is, as long as it doesn't have, say, 0.1 or 6.3. There no decimals and no fractions are possible with integers, so we have to have whole numbers with our integers. The second data type is a float, and a float is a number with decimals or with fractions. Usually they represent certain measurements, percentages, or they help in calculations that need a little bit more precision. So for example, when the coders or designers for Task Manager here in Windows built this, they used float as a data type because you can see on each of these different applications, it's showing a decimal, 3.6%, 602.6, 0.6 again, 0.1. Now, if these weren't floats and these were just integers, what it would look like is 3%, 602%, 0 or 1%. So floats are a little bit more useful because we can start getting more accurate measurements of things and we can start to be to the precise decimal of exactly what we're working with. In this case, the Microsoft Edge here with the red highlight around it, that's our example of a float. And then up here, these are examples of integers. So if you pulled up Task Manager right now, you would see at the very top, it only records in integers. So 12%, 13%, 14%, 88%, 6%, 7%, whatever it is. And then each task below that, each process rather, it actually records in float. So Task Manager is a great example of integers versus float. Next up is strings. And strings are a sequence of any text or characters enclosed in quotes. These are used for storing names, host names, file paths, messages, things like that in scripts or in programming. And they're also essential for identifying devices, users, files, and IT related tasks. So for example, strings, you could think of host name equals this is the string within the quotes. File path equals string. This here is the string. So it's relatively simple. It's essentially just text or characters within quotes. Next up is booleans. So a boolean is a data type that represents either true or false. Super simple. They're used for helping to check with system status, having certain conditions or permissions in script or programs. They also help automate decisions and they can help verify certain conditions. An example here would be is online, which is a variable for showing whether something is offline or online, so checking if a server is online in this case, is online equals true. This is a Boolean. It could also say is online equals false. It's either true or false. It can't be like is online equals 0.1 like a float or is online equals 1 like an integer. With a Boolean, it has to be either true or false. Same thing here. Has access equals this Boolean, which is false. Now, one thing I wanted to clarify here, the actual code side of things is here. This parentheses is just for us for learning purposes. So it would really look like has underscore access equals false. We wouldn't see the actual permission or the actual parentheses if this was real code that we were looking at. And lastly, we have arrays and lists. So an array or a list is a collection of multiple values that are stored in one variable. They're often used for multiple items like IP addresses, usernames, log entries, things like that. For example, we could see IP addresses equals brackets, quote, IP address, quote, comma, quote, IP address, end quote, comma, quote, IP address, end quote, end bracket. Now, the way that this is structured might look differently script to script or programming language to programming language. In fact, all the examples we showed you, they might look different from program to program. So just keep that in mind. Programming languages differ vastly in the way they might structure this. So for example, some might have, instead of brackets, they might use parentheses, right? This is just a very, very broad example, and we're not talking about any one programming language or scripting language or any other language. This is just an example. So same thing here. Users equals bracket, parentheses, admin, which is one of our roles or our users, comma. So for example, with this users here, it would be users equals bracket, open quote, admin, end quote, so on and so forth. And it would list out the various users or their various roles. Overall, all you really need to know for these specific types of data and the various data types that we discussed in this video is just understand them. Just understand what each is used for, what each use case really is. And from there, you don't need to understand exactly how to write them out in programming. You don't need to understand from a very, very in-depth perspective exactly where you would use them within certain programming languages or certain scripting languages. Just understand them from a conceptual level. What I advise you to do is, because we're at the end of the video, if you haven't already, take physical notes and take just one sentence on each one. Explain it, what it does in your own words. So for example, if you were taking notes on arrays and lists, in one sentence, you could just put down, it stores multiple values in one variable. It can store multiple items such as IP addresses, usernames, log entries, or really any multiple items that the program needs to reference or to use, and just write down one example that you make yourself. So for example, we could write down something like devices equals bracket, open quote, computer, end quote, comma, open quote, laptop, end quote, comma, open quote, smartphone, end quote, bracket. So make up your own. Do something IT related. Make your own examples for each one, and they're really going to help you to fully grasp these concepts. That way you can use them come exam time.